I'm Claire and I am the Night Owl, and we are listening to Smile Radio. And tonight we're going to be talking to James. Hi, James.
Hi Claire, thank you for having me on this evening.
You are more than welcome. Before we go into the interview, what I want you to do is introduce your first song. So, does it mean anything to you, or just you like the music?
So, touching on the subject of where the rest of this evening is going to go on, I've chosen the song 1-800-273-8255 by Logic. Now, this song had sort of a meaning to myself. It's very much about suicide prevention. So, it's a suicide prevention number within the US. And I know that it raised extra calls to 10,000 was the peak of calls due to this song being released. And yeah.
Wow, thank you ever so much. So let's listen to it. That is a fantastic song, James. You will understand why it got where it did. And thank you for that little bit of background. That was brilliant. So yeah. I'm here this evening, and all the ones listening, they don't want to hear the night owl going off. They want to hear you, James. They want to hear your story. So if you can tell us, all I know, was it due to the accident or was it beforehand?
So going back, it was before the accident when it was sort of started to happen. So I was having going through quite a bad time at the time, and I was just feeling very low. I didn't really know where my life was going, if I had a purpose at all. And I was doing cycling, and I just felt this isn't what I want to do. I remember having a breakdown on the toilet. My dad sort of standing outside the toilet and waiting for me for about 45 minutes while I sat on the toilet. That's the first time I ever really spoke about it to family members. I told one of my mates quite vividly about it, and they helped me a massive amount through it all. And the day that I actually broke my jaw, I thought, I'm going to book a doctor's appointment. I'm going to go and try and get some help for this. But I thought, you know what, I'll go out on my bike instead, because that's what I was sort of doing at the time, and that was my career. And I was riding, and I just remember falling off, face planting the floor, and I broke my jaw. So I've now got a metal plate in my jaw and stuff.
Can I just ask one question at this point in time? What stopped you going to your family about it?
I feel it's one of those, you never want to sort of burden family with it, do you? It's one of those you don't want to worry them. That's the least thing that you want to do. You don't want to upset them or worry them or make them feel that they're not doing a good job when they were. But it was one of those, talking to a friend and talking to someone not someone who I have to see all the time, and not someone who I have to, if I didn't want to talk to them, I don't have to talk to them, when I feel that family can sometimes fuss a little bit too much in that sense. So in my head, I was worried that they were going to go and fuss around me and sort of go into just always checking up on me, which would have made it, in my mind, even worse at the time. So I was trying to avoid that. So talking to my friend and bringing it up to her was probably the best way to do it. And then they were the reason that I ended up going to the doctors sort of after all. But yeah.
I think that is one of the biggest things, that we don't like to burden our family. And yet they don't view it like that, do they, James? But we do. In all honesty, what I found, that you've done the right thing, because you went to a friend that wasn't in your face all the time, and you were able to maybe just distance yourself. Did you find that?
Definitely, because with it, some days you'll have an okay day, and then other days you'll just not want to talk to anyone. And when you don't want to talk to anyone, having someone who's living under the same roof as you, someone who's in the same house as you, asking you questions, I felt that it would have made it worse in my sort of situation. When if you tell a friend who lives 30, 40 miles away, you can just turn off your phone. You don't have to talk to them, and you don't have to bring up the situation, which made it a lot easier. So in my opinion, yeah.
So before we go any further, what is your second track, James?
Because we've just touched on sort of family and stuff like that. We'll go Father and Son by Yusuf Cat Stevens.
Oh, yeah.
Which is also a song that is in one of my favourite films at the end, which is Guardians of the Galaxy.
Great song, and great reason why you chose that, James. Thank you very much. Brilliant. So let's dig a little bit deeper. What were the kind of things that you found yourself telling your friend?
I was just very sort of distant. I didn't really want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to do much. So I was just finding it hard to train. I was telling her, but then I was also saying that I was feeling very low. Sometimes I was saying that I didn't want to be here and stuff like that, and that I felt that sort of that I didn't have like I said, that I didn't have a purpose, or that I felt sort of very much like I was just going through life with nothing. And I just felt like there was no end sort of period to that. And it was it was a hard time to be able to sort of go out and tell a friend that, but they sort of suffer from the anxiety side as well. So they get a understanding of that, which helped massively. I feel like someone who suffers with either depression or anxiety, or both in a lot of cases, they also have a mutual understanding of what it actually feels like.
Definitely.
Yeah. So when I reached out and I started talking, they sort of knew the questions to ask to dig a bit deeper, when some of the other people wouldn't understand it and would just think that you're just going through a hard time, or you're just having a bit of a down day, when realistically depression isn't that. It's an accumulation of weeks, months of feeling low, feeling sort of helpless, is what I found.
Did you find when you finally went to the doctor, is a lot of people, they either get a good doctor or they don't? How did you find it?
I was fortunate enough. So the friend who I told was like, well, we'll go to the doctors and then we'll have a day out after. So we ended up going to the doctors, then we went to Chester Zoo, and then up to Liverpool and stuff. We just sort of made a day of it, which sort of took my mind off the whole situation, because I was building up a lot of pressure to go to the doctors and talk to the doctors about it, because it's, especially I feel as a man, in a situation when you're going to talk to someone, it's a lot harder to open up, because obviously I think the stigma around that's slowly starting to be lifted. But at the time, it was 2.5 years ago when I sort of went through this, and it was a hard time. It was sort of like, and at the time you don't really want to go and talk to a doctor, but having that day planned out and stuff really helped me get there. And when I was there, the doctors were really helpful. I was fortunate enough that the doctor I went to see, he also had suffered from it. So he had an understanding, which our doctors, they've got multiple different sort of departments. And I know that a lot of other doctors, you don't have that. But the one that I went to, they had multiple different departments, and they asked me what I was ringing, and I had to tell them over the phone, and they put me into the sort of right hands. And he took me in, and he was like, he spoke through quite a few different options. He was like, you can go through therapy, you can go on medication, you can do all this. And the one thing at the time I didn't want to do was go on medication, because you feel like that's not going to be the answer. You can't just sort of dose yourself up on drugs to fix this. So I went for the therapy, but it was about 3 weeks until the therapist could actually see me. I was fortunate that it was in-house therapy for the first 5 weeks within our medical practice. So I was going to that after about waiting for that 3-week period. But over that, I felt that I was getting worse. I wasn't getting any better. I suppose going through, because this was just after I broke my jaw as well. So not being able to eat substantial meals, not being able to do all that was just aggravating the situation worse. So at that point, I ended up going back after about a week and a half, and that's when I did go onto the medication. And the medication, I was fortunate enough, because I know that there's about 6 medications out there that can put you on, and I was fortunate that the first one I got put on started to work after I'd say about 6 weeks is when it started to take effect.
It's normally that, isn't it? About 6 to 8 weeks before it kicks in and you feel any kind of benefit. You probably did the right thing as well to continue with your therapy, and realize that you needed a little bit more than that. If you need medication and the doctor says to take it, you need it.
Yeah, definitely. Know? And that's the thing. And the thing is, the doctors give you the dosage, they start you on a low dosage. So it takes a while to get used to. And the one thing I found was my anxiety levels sort of shot through the roof. The thoughts of sort of suicide and stuff also rose. I found out that can be due to the medication. So it's one of those where you've got to sort of not push through, but you've got to be understanding that that's going to happen, because I feel that some people will definitely try the medication for a week or 2 weeks and then feel like, this is actually making me worse, I need to get off this. And if you don't have the sort of people around you to support you, then that's when it starts to really become quite detrimental, because they'll go onto the tablets, they won't have the support group or the people around them who sort of want to help them, and it makes them worse to the point where they feel like that's the end, that's the last sort of hope that they had. And that's when I feel that sometimes it can just could go out of control for some people. Yeah,
that's a really good point that you've made. Before we go any further into the interview again, I think we've ended on a really good point on that that with the medication. I'm really grateful to you to explain how you felt. So your third track, James.
Yeah. So my third track is Under the Bridge by Red Hot Chili Peppers. So again, quite quite a slow one for sort of Red Hot Chili Peppers, but yeah, it's a song that really means something to me.
Another good choice, and it's very rare, when I do interviews, they mention songs, and I think, no, I don't know that. No, I don't know that. But I recognise two that you've mentioned, James. So
Yeah.
great. Before you introduced that song, we ended on medication. So how did you kick through it? How did you power through it? Or did it make you feel worse?
It didn't make me feel worse. So I remember we were meant to go out for my sister's birthday. So it was her birthday's in October. And I'd just been on the medication for a couple of weeks at this point, and I just couldn't bring myself to leave my bedroom. So at that point, I just I lay in bed. We didn't do anything. But I remember spending quite a lot of time in my bed as well, where I didn't want to leave my bedroom. I felt like that was a place where I felt safe. But at the same time, it was also a place where it is hard when you get into that routine. It's hard to sort of get out of it, and it's hard to. You feel so safe in there that you go to bed there. You'll go downstairs. I went downstairs and ate, but then I'd go sort of and spend the majority of my time in there, and it was sort of like it was my safe space. Is sort of they sort of call it in therapy and stuff like that. It's the place where you go to escape everything. But then saying that, I was also having sort of quite bad, not dreams, but thoughts as well at the same time. So I remember sometimes like I'd picture myself committing suicide, and like all the relief was gone and stuff like that. So that was quite a scary place to be in.
Yeah, frightening.
Yeah.
So did you feel now then that you needed more backing or more support?
Yeah, I felt that. So my therapy had just started at this point with the one of the doctors, and they were slowly building it up, and they were going through everything with me. But then it sort of came tail end of October, beginning of November, and I was fortunate that my dad paid for me to go and see a psychiatrist as well.
Yeah.
Now it was expensive, and it's a shame that not a lot of people can be in that fortunate position to be able to afford to go. But I feel that they give you a different perspective as well compared to therapy that you have, because they do CBT, they do all of that.
Yeah.
When the psychiatrist sort of goes through a whole life with you, he goes through everything, what could have caused it, and ways to tackle each individual situation that you're in. When therapy can sometimes be, it's sort of like one shoe fits all in that sense. Sometimes.
Yes, I understand. Yeah. You're giving so much to so many people, James. Believe me.
Yeah. It's just it's taking that first step is the thing that I'd always suggest to people. It's the hardest. The first step's always the hardest step in whatever you do, and making sure that you take it and you go sort of as hard as it might be. It's only going to get easier after that. So people, as soon as people are aware, they're aware, and they'll try and help you as much as possible. But if you keep it to yourself, there's millions of people out there who feel exactly the same. Some people don't want to reach out, and some people don't have the support groups around them to reach out. And that's sort of, I can understand how hard it must be for them, but taking that step. So the one thing that I did reach out to the Samaritans as well, which was something that I rang one night, and that really helped. Yeah,
I'm a true believer of that. A problem shared is a problem halved, and that is something I've learned over the years, James. So I'm really pleased that you did reach out at that time. You mentioned about the Samaritans. What made you reach out at that particular time?
It was late at night, so my sleep was all over the place. I was sleeping about 3 hours probably a night, because I was just spending the majority of my day in bed. So I wasn't tired. I wasn't able to wear myself out, and I was barely sleeping. And the thoughts and the dreams and stuff were just getting very vivid, in the sense that I just could picture myself doing something, and I needed someone to talk to. And so I just rang them and I just spoke to them, and the help that they give there, and the sort of support, and the support network they've got there, and the people who work there, because they're all voluntary. So, and it's all people who just want to help as much as possible. And that's the thing, they've all been in the same situation. And that's one of the points that I made earlier, that until you've been in that situation, I think people find it very hard to understand the situation. It's hard to sort of give an example, I suppose, but it's like saying you know how to play at a professional level in football. If you've only ever played on Sunday League, it's so hard to sort of understand the difference. It's the same with depression. Like you might have had a bad day or two, but depression isn't a day or two. Depression's months, maybe even years at a time. That it can
Yeah,
be sort of there.
exactly. Good illustration there, James. I
Yeah.
love illustrations. I really do. Did it go any further after the Samaritans, or are we now on about a reverse situation? Because I know you're doing really well now, from what I hear.
Yeah.
So what happened after you had that conversation?
So after that conversation, I wouldn't say that was the turning point. I'd say it's hard to actually put a finger on the turning point. I think it's hard because it's not one of those where you just go into the therapy session, then you leave and you're all okay. It's not like that. It's not going to see like a chiropractor and they just crack a bone and then you feel, oh, I feel really loose now.
That's right.
It's a long process. It's not. It's the little things add up to. You've just got to believe in that process of go and get that help, reach out, talk to someone, and then slowly take the baby steps. And the more baby steps you take, the easier it becomes. Is the one thing I'd say. So there was one time when I was really bad, and that was I used to work in a bike shop, and I remember I just sat on the chair and I was shaking, and I just wasn't talking to anyone. I wasn't myself, and one of the people who worked there came up to me and was just like, "You don't seem yourself," all that sort of stuff. So they sort of sent me home, and I remember driving down the motorway, and I just didn't want to be there and stuff like that, and I felt very I felt kind of scared as well in a sense. Because you just don't know what you could do in the situation that you're in.
Did you feel like at that time while you were driving, dissociating away from yourself?
Yeah, definitely. So I just felt that I wasn't. So I can't. It's so hard because it's like people say, like days become very sort of like grey and doomy, and like until you suffer from it, it's so hard to say. But you do just feel like you're sitting there and just watching your life go by. You're not engaged and you're not taking control over yourself. You're letting it control you. And that's something. So it's a hard thing because you feel that it's normal. You do sort of feel that it's normal to sometimes have days where like you don't feel like you've done anything, or you feel that your whole body's being out of control and that someone else has had control over you, and you don't want to socialize with people. And you feel that sort of becomes the norm because it becomes comfortable. That's the thing. It becomes you've done it so often that it becomes a routine for you, and your body loves that routine, and it feels that this is what life is.
It's like a comfort blanket, isn't it? You kind of put around you and realize it's not really comforting you. What are a couple of points of suggestion that you would make to people? And I would say at this point, especially men, because very often men are told to man up, as we've already said. What would you say to them?
I'd say it sort of goes back to a saying that I've got sort of taught in my work, that eating the frog at the beginning of each day. So it sort of looks at taking that first step, making the hardest step's always going to be the first one in whatever you do in life. And it's taking that first step. It's admitting that this isn't normal. It's trying, not covering it up. So sometimes I'd sit in a room full of people and just disengage and just not want to be in that room, and not even, I could sit in a room for an hour and not have got one conversation that was happening, but people would have spoken to me. I know they would have, but I was just so zoned out and so focused on myself. Well, not even on myself, just caught in my own thoughts. And I feel that even if you don't want to go and talk to someone and don't want to go and get help, just reach out to someone who might not even be a friend, might be someone like the Samaritans, or might be just someone who you've seen might be going through the same thing on even social media, where they might be feeling a little bit. They might be doing statuses where they're going, oh, I feel so this, and this, I feel terrible. Just reaching out to those people, because the people who understand the most are the people who are going through the same.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think you really made that point, I think, all the way through the interview, James. And I really appreciate that, because I can relate to that myself. Where are you now, James? Can you share with us where you are now?
I'd say I'm not saying that every day is amazing, because it's not, but I'd say I'm in a position where I have more happy days than I have sad. So I'd assume that would equal that you are happy, when it's nobody's always happy, nobody's always sad, but when you're depressed, you are always feeling very sort of vulnerable, very sad and stuff. When some days I'll get feel down and I'll feel a bit not wanting to do stuff and a bit sort of disengaged with the world.
Mhm.
But that would be maybe 1 to maximum 3 days, but it's not day in, day out for months at a time. And I'd
Yeah.
say the one thing that I did notice that helped massively was sort of meditation. Now, this is something
Right.
that
Yeah.
they don't really touch on in the psychiatry sessions and stuff, but I was reading. So I got into a lot of reading when I sort of was coming out the other side,
Mhm.
and I read quite a few books, and a lot of them pointed towards how meditation can sort of just change your views on life.
Mm.
And it's something that I try and do as much as possible and as regularly as possible.
Mm.
So I've got Headspace on my phone, which is just they set you little plans, so they'll do step-by-step guides on how to meditate. And
Yeah.
it just,
Yeah.
because the one thing when you're depressed, you get lost in your thoughts, and it's
Yeah.
learning how to control those thoughts and how to just sort of sit there and watch your thoughts go by. It's not about
Mm.
trying to control them, because you have so many thoughts at one point when you're depressed that
Mhm.
trying to sit there and control them makes it worse, and then you go into a spiral and it goes out of control.
Mhm.
When the meditation sort of taught me to sit there and just sort of watch the thoughts, which is
Mhm.
it took a very long time to get used to. And I thought I was very skeptical, probably like a lot of people are, that this can't work. It's you're just sitting there, you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
But the more you do it, the more it does become easier.
I agree with you 100% there. It's like
Yeah.
changing our mindset, isn't it? And that's one thing that I think helped me in a lot of areas. Is what when I was doing my psychology, James, I remember one illustration given to us was like just closing your eyes and putting your hands in front of you and a piece of scrapped paper. And your thoughts are so muddled at this time, isn't it? You've got so many things swishing around in you. And it says, focus yourself on that bit of paper as if all those negative thoughts are going on to that bit of paper. And then physically, even keeping your eyes closed, grab that bit of paper, squash it up and just chuck it away. Can you share one of the meditations?
One of my sort of favourite ones was sort of sit there, you sort of start with your eyes open, and you observe the room. So you don't focus on one thing in particular. You observe your surroundings without looking around either. It's very sort of strange, but you sort of like look straight ahead, but your peripheral vision, or I think that's
Yeah.
how you say it anyway. uh, it's sort of like you use that, and you slowly breathe in and you breathe out, but you do it heavy enough that people, if they're around you, would hear you. And then you
Hmm.
just slowly, on your like fifth or sixth out breath, you just close your eyes, and then you go back to not your normal breathing pattern through your nose. And what you do is you just focus on your breaths. So you focus on, you count to one, you count up to 10. So your first one in breath is 1, second your out breath is 2, and then you continue, you get to 10 and you restart. After doing that for about 5 minutes, you then start to focus on different points of your body. Because the one thing with depression is you feel that you're out of control, and just focusing on being grounded and focusing on contact points. So your feet on the floor, your bum on the seat, your back against the sort of chair, all those sort of focus points just show that you are still grounded. At the same time, you will be having thoughts, but it's just all about focusing on those breaths and focusing on
Yeah.
the contact points is the meditation I really sort of liked.
It's been an absolute pleasure, James, the interview, and you've brought so much that I believe will help. Before you introduce your very last song to us, is there any last point that you yourself feel, Claire, I really would want to get this over to the audience?
I'd say just sort of depression's, I wouldn't say it's caused, I'd say sometimes it can be caused by your situation, and other times it can be caused by a chemical imbalance. And it's reaching out and getting that help and learning how, you're never going to get fully rid of it, and that's not what it's about. It's learning how to deal with it and how to
Yeah,
live your life with
great
it.
point.
And it's not all about being the person who, I fully got rid of it. It's about understanding that this is who you are and it's part of you. Don't try and make it something that is complete opposite to who you are.
Brilliant, brilliant. What a lovely thought to end on. So, James, thank you very much for giving us your time and so much good advice and your story as well. So, what are we going to end on? What song are you going to give us?
So we're going to go for Bane by Baker Matt, which is sort of like a bit more like a house music song. bit more uplifting than the other music that I've chosen this evening. But yeah, it's a song that sort of I like to go to the gym and do workouts too.
And do your workouts on that. Thank you ever so much, James.
No, it's okay.
Continue to live your life to the full and continue to do what you're doing now. And I wish you all the best for the future, James. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. No worries. Thank you for your time. Bye.